Moving on to chapter 19, offences and penalties. Section 122, penalty for certain offences. There are 21 offences which has been listed in this section, and penalties are prescribed below. So let us see first what are the offences which are covered under this section. Any taxable person who supplies goods or services without invoice, and or if he issues invoice without supply of goods or service, collects but fails to pay the taxes within 3 months from the date of collection, and if he is collecting the taxes in contravention but fails to pay within 3 months, failing to deduct or short deduct or not paying the TDS, if he is failing to collect or short collect or not paying the TCS, taking ITC without receipt of goods or services, fraudulent refund, ITC in contravention of ISD provisions, fake accounts or documents, liable but not registered, false information during registration, obstructing an officer and or transport without documents, suppression of turnover, fails to keep books of accounts, fails to furnish or furnish false information, deals with goods liable for confiscation, using registration number of another person, tampering the evidence, and tampering or disposes goods seized or detained or attached. In all these offences, the penalty is 10,000 rupees or tax evaded, whichever is higher, and person retaining the benefit is liable for a penalty of tax evaded. And any registered person, if tax is not paid or short paid or refunded erroneously or ITC wrongly availed or utilized, and it is on account of other than fraud cases, then he is liable for a penalty of 10,000 rupees or 10% of the tax, whichever is higher. If it is on account of fraud, then he is liable for a penalty of 10,000 rupees or 100% of the tax, whichever is higher. And any person who is abetting an offence, who is supporting the person who is committing an offence, or who deals with the confiscated goods, or who receives in contravention of act, or fails to appear for summons, or fails to issue invoice or account, then he is liable for a penalty not exceeding 25,000 rupees. Section 123, penalty for failure to furnish information written, and the penalty for not furnishing information written as prescribed under section 150 is 100 rupees per day, subject to maximum 5,000 rupees. And the fine for not furnishing the statistics required as per section 151, then the penalty will be not exceeding 10,000 rupees. And if it is a continuing offense, then 100 rupees per day, subject to a maximum of 25,000 rupees. Section 125, general penalty. If you contravene any provision and where the penalty is not separately prescribed, then penalty will be for a sum not exceeding 25,000 rupees. Section 126, general disciplines relating to penalty. There is no penalty for minor breaches or errors apparent on the face of the record, and if the tax involved is less than 5,000 rupees. Penalty depends on facts of each case. It will not be same for all the cases. No penalty without opportunity of being heard. Officer shall specify the nature of breach, applicable law. If person voluntarily discloses, then proper officer shall consider this fact as a mitigating factor for quantifying the penalty. Section 126 shall not apply where penalty is fixed sum or percentages. Power to impose penalty in certain cases. If proper officer is of the view that the person is liable for penalty and the same is not covered under section 62, 63, 64, 73, 74, 129 detention and 130 confiscation, then penalty order will be passed after giving opportunity of being heard. Section 128, power to waive penalty or fee or both. Government by notification waive penalty for a class of taxpayers under section 122, 123, 125 or late fee under 47. Section 129 deals with detention, seizure and release of goods and conveyances in transit. If there is a transport happening in contravention of act, or if the goods are stored in contravention of act, then all such goods, conveyance and documents will be liable for detention or seizure and will be released only on payment of penalty. Where the owner comes forward the payment of tax and penalty, penalty is 100% of the tax. and if the owner does not come forward, then penalty will be 50% of the tax. Of course, you have to pay taxes, and then penalty is 100% of the tax when owner comes forward, and when owner does not come forward, the penalty is 50% of the tax. And in case if it is exempted goods, then penalty will be 2% of the value or 25,000 rupees, whichever is less. And if owner does not come forward and if it is exempted goods, then penalty will be 5% of the value or 25,000 rupees, whichever is less. You can also furnish a security equivalent to A or B as the case may be, and they can seek release of your goods or conveyances or documents. No detention or seizure without serving any order. So order has to be served, and then only the detention or seizure proceedings has to start. Providing bond is similar to section 67 subsection 6 mutatis mutandis apply. Proper officer shall issue notice and pass an order. No determination of tax or interest or penalty without opportunity of being heard. On payment, proceedings will be deemed to be concluded, and if you are failing to pay within 14 days of detention or seizure, then further proceedings will be initiated. Section 130 deals with confiscation of goods or conveyances and levy of penalty. If any person supplies or receives any goods in contravention of provisions, if he does not account for any goods, if he supplies any goods without applying for registration, if he is contravening with an intention to evade the taxes, if he uses any conveyance as a means of transport in contravention, then all such goods or conveyances shall be liable to confiscation. Option to pay fine in lieu of confiscation. The fine should not exceed the market value minus taxes, and the aggregate of fine and penalty should not exceed the penalty prescribed under section 129 subsection 1. Owner of conveyance shall be given an option to pay fine which is equivalent to tax. Fine in lieu of confiscation in addition to tax, penalty and charges. So the fine which is being levied is in lieu of confiscation, therefore you have to pay taxes, penalty and other charges, as well as the fine in lieu of confiscation, which is additional. No order can be passed without opportunity of being heard. Title of the goods or conveyances confiscated vests with the government. This is the main difference between detention and confiscation. In detention, the ownership of the goods or title of the goods or conveyance will not get passed to government, but in case of confiscation, the title of the goods or conveyance vests with the government. Proper officer shall hold possession and police officer shall assist him, and proper officer shall dispose of and deposit the proceedings with government after giving reasonable time not exceeding 3 months to pay the fine. Confiscation or penalty not to interfere with other punishment. Just because there is a confiscation or there is a penalty imposed, it does not mean that the officers are prevented from infliction of any other punishment. You can still be prosecuted and other punishments are still applicable. So section 132, punishment for certain offences. So whoever commits or causes to commit the listed 12 offences in section 132 will be punishable with an imprisonment as prescribed. So let us see the listed offences, 12 offences listed under section 132. If you supply goods or service without invoice, if you are issuing invoice without supply of goods or service, and if you avail ITC using invoice in B, or if you collect tax but fails to pay within 3 months, if you evade the taxes or fraudulently obtain refund, falsifies financial accounts, obstruct or prevent an officer, deals with goods liable for confiscation, deals with supply of services in contravention of the act, tampers evidence, if you fail to supply information or if you are supplying false information, if you are attempting to commit or abetting the commitment of offences, then you shall be punishable with an imprisonment of up to 5 years and fine if the tax evaded is greater than 5 crores. And if the tax evaded is greater than 2 crores and less than or equal to 5 crores, then the imprisonment will be up to 3 years and fine. And if the tax evaded is more than 1 crore and less than or equal to 2 crores, then imprisonment will be for 1 year, up to 1 year, and fine. And if you commit or abets any offences prescribed under FGJ, then imprisonment will be for 6 months or fine or both. If a person is convicted under 132, is again convicted under section 132, then he will be punishable with an imprisonment of up to 5 years and fine. Imprisonment for subsection 1, clause 1, 2 and 3 and subsection 2 shall be more than 6 months unless special and adequate reasons. So when we are talking about imprisonment of 5 years, 3 years or 1 year, or when we are talking about imprisonment of repeated 5 years for repeated offences, in all these cases the minimum imprisonment shall be for 6 months at least. Only the offences listed under subsection 5 will be treated as cognizable and non-bailable offences. So cognizable means very serious offences, and they are non-bailable offences. And other than subsection 5, all other offences will be treated as non-cognizable and bailable. These are slightly less serious offences and they are bailable offences. But if the offences are covered under A, B, C, D of subsection 1 and the tax evaded is more than 5 crores, in that case alone the offences will be cognizable and non-bailable offences. Other than that, all offences will be non-cognizable and bailable. So you can get a bail and you will be released on submission of bail. Prior approval of commissioner is mandatory for prosecuting under section 132. Section 133 deals with liability of officers and certain other persons. Even the officers, government officers and certain other persons who are dealing with the government officers are also liable for punishments. Central tax officer discloses contents of returns or any person under section 151 or 150 subsection 1 wherever information written or statistics are collected, and who has the information access. If that person is disclosing, or even the central tax officer is disclosing the contents of returns, in that case they are punishable with an imprisonment of 6 months, up to 6 months, or up to 25,000 rupees, or both. But before levying punishment, if he is a government servant, prior approval of government is mandatory, and if he is non-government servant, then prior approval of commissioner is also mandatory. Section 134, cognizance of offences. No court shall take cognizance without prior approval of commissioner. So only if there is an approval of commissioner, courts will take cognizance of offences. Then only they will recognize or admit offences. No court below magistrate first class shall try such offences. So only courts which are of magistrate first class or above can only try these offences. Other courts which are below the magistrate first class level are not permissible to admit any such take such offences into cognizance. Section 135, presumption of culpable mental state. Court shall presume the existence of culpable mental state, and it shall be a defense for the accused to prove that he had no such mental state. So accused has to always prove that or defend himself that there is no such mental state, but court will always presume that the accused has culpable mental state. Section 136, relevancy of statements under certain circumstances. So the statements signed during summons shall be relevant for proving the truth of facts only under these circumstances. If the person made the statement is dead or not found or incapable or kept out or unreasonable delay, and if person examined as a witness and court is of the opinion that the statement should be admitted, if that person has come to the court as a witness and he has given a he was examined in the court, but still the court thinks that the statement should be admitted for proving the truth of facts, in that case the statement signed during the summons will be relevant for proving the truth of facts. Section 137, offences by companies. If a company is committing an offence, then every person in charge of conducting business as well as company shall be deemed to be guilty of the offence. And if the offence is committed with the consent or connivance or negligence of any officer, then such officer shall be deemed to be guilty of such offence. And in case of firm HUF trust, the partner or karta or managing trustee will be deemed to be guilty of offence. No liability if
they prove that the offense has been committed without their knowledge or they have exercised due diligence uh, for avoiding such offenses, then in that case they will not be liable. In all other scenarios they will be liable. Section 138 talks about compounding of offenses. Any offense can be compounded by commissioner on payment of compounding fee before or after initiation of prosecution. So it can be compromised if you are paying the compounding fee, provided the compounding is not applicable in following cases: A, B, C, D, E, F. Compounding allowed once for section 132 1A to F and L. Compounding allowed already for section 132 1B to L, and supply value is more than 1 crore. It is an offense under this act and as well as any other law for the time being in force. If the person has been already convicted by a court, if they are accused of 132 1G, J, K, any other as notified, in all these cases compounding of offences are not allowed. Compounding under GST shall not affect any proceeding under any other law. So compounding under GST is only for the proceedings under GST law. It will not affect proceedings under any other law. Compounding is allowed only after making the payment of taxes, interest and penalties. Then you pay the compounding fee. The compounding fee payable is minimum 10,000 or 50% of the taxes. Maximum is 30,000 or 150% of the taxes. On payment, all proceedings will be deemed to be stopped.